Everyone, in this video we're going to go through the anatomy of the brain. Before we start, as a reminder, we are going to take a look at a model diagram of the brain, and whenever you are finished understanding all the structures on the models that are shown here, make sure you take a look at a dissected sheep brain and label the parts in the dissected sheep brain as well. So this is applying your knowledge throughout different brain models to ensure that you fully understand. In addition, anytime you see a star after a name of a structure, make sure you understand the function of that structure as well. We're also going to go through the 12 cranial nerves and make sure you know how to identify the cranial nerves and also their functions. So let's start off with the lobes of the brain. In this diagram, the first thing that you should do is identify the anterior versus the posterior. This is the anterior region of the brain here. This is the posterior. The way you can tell is that the cerebellum is going to be found more on the posterior end. So this is the front part. There are 5 lobes within the brain, but we're going to talk primarily about 4 of these lobes. They're the easier ones to see. In the front part of your brain, this is the frontal lobe. So if you take your hand and you touch it in the front part of your brain, this is the frontal lobe. And this lobe is the one that is being developed all the way to the age of 25 to maybe 30s in some individual. This is the area in your brain where all the logical process is occurring. Now keep in mind, logical process is occurring all throughout your brain, but it's heavily concentrated in the frontal region. In the middle part, you have the parietal lobe. The parietal lobe is split between the left and the right side. So this is the parietal lobe here. And then on the left and right side, you also have the temporal lobe too. The temporal lobe, this is the area that's heavily involved in auditory processing. So processing hearing information. And then in the back, you have the occipital lobe. This is the lobe that processes primarily visual information. So remember, if you accidentally fall and then you hit the back of your head, when you open up your eyes, your vision is a little bit blurry because you have hit the occipital lobe where visual information is being processed. So now let's take a look at a model brain. In the model brain, this is a side view. This is a bird's eye view. So this is looking at the top down. So this is the superior view. You can see the bulk of the brain is the cerebrum. Do not confuse the cerebrum with the cerebellum. The cerebrum is the main part of the brain and the cerebellum is part of the hind part. The cerebrum is involved with all complex thinking and the cerebellum is involved with balance. If you notice, the cerebrum is very large. In humans, the cerebrum is much larger compared to the cerebellum ratio-wise. If you take a look at birds, they have a much larger cerebellum compared to the cerebrum. Yes, but remember, this is speaking ratio-wise. The cerebellum in birds are much larger compared to humans ratio-wise. And this is it makes sense because birds, they're flying at very high altitude. So they need to have a good way of balancing where they are spatially. Then remember, you have the frontal lobe, the parietal lobe, the left and right, the occipital lobe, the left and right. Sorry, this is the temporal lobe, left and right, and then the occipital lobe in the back. Another thing I want to point out too is that on your brain, you have these hills, these little bumps. Those are called the gyrus. Now, the lateral sulcus is this big divot right here that separates the top and the bottom portion of the brain. So this is the lateral sulcus. This is the transverse cerebral fissure. So this is another division that separates the upper brain from the hind brain right here. So this is the transverse cerebral fissure, and this is the lateral sulcus. This is the longitudinal fissure, which is another separation between the left and the right cerebral hemisphere. Another division that we're going to see is the central sulcus. So the central sulcus, you see, it's this line that separates the anterior versus the posterior part of the brain. Now, going back to the hills, the gyrus that I was mentioning before, these are the little bump, okay? You have the precentral gyrus, which is this bump right here that is found anterior to the central gyrus. And then you also have the post-central gyrus, which is found in the back, posterior to the central gyrus. Now, having these bumps on your brain is increasing the surface area for your brain for more information to be processed. And a fun fact is that Albert Einstein, he had significantly more bumps, more gyri on his brain compared to the average person. And then if you're curious, all of these little grooves are called the sulci. So the bumps are the gyrus and the grooves are the sulcus. All right, so now we're looking at the inferior view of the brain, so looking at the bottom up. Just a reminder, you can still see the cerebrum, the main part of the brain. This part down here, that's the cerebellum, that's involved with balancing information. You got the medulla oblongata, this is part of the hindbrain, and then you also have the pons. We'll see a better picture of the pons and the medulla oblongata later. All right, now some new structures that we haven't seen yet. This is the olfactory bulb. This is going to send smelling information to the olfactory tract, and that goes further down into your brain for your brain to process what you're smelling. This is the optic chiasm right here. So this part is the optic chiasm, and this is sending information from your optic nerve all the way to the occipital lobe of your brain for visual processing. This right here is the optic tract. So the optic chiasm, it crisscrossed to the optic tract. The optic chiasm crisscrossed here to the optic tract. And this is sending light information to the occipital lobe so that you can process what you're seeing. This right here is the pituitary gland, which sends out hormone. And this is the mammillary body. We'll talk more about the pituitary gland and the mammillary body when we take a look at the sagittal view of the brain. All right, so here is the sagittal view of the brain. As a reminder, this is the cerebrum, and this right here is the cerebellum. Now, I want to go into a little bit further detail about the cerebellum. If you take a closer look on the inside, you see all these dendritic tree-like structure. This is called the arbor vitae. This is Latin translated to a tree-like structure. So this is inside of the cerebellum, and this is just having more nerve information being processed through here in these nerves. All right, and then we can see the pons in a better view here. The pons is a structure that sends information from the upper portion of your brain to the hindbrain, and that is the main function of the pons that we know of as today. So it sends information to and from the brain and the medulla oblongata. The medulla oblongata is an area that is known for autonomic functions, such as your breathing, your blinking, your heart rate, blood pressure. It's controlled by the medulla oblongata as well. This structure right here, it looks like a C. This is called the corpus callosum, so you can use that to study. The corpus callosum has nerve fibers that sends information between the left and the right cerebral hemisphere. This area right here is the septum pellucidum. So this area is heavily involved in regulating social and emotion behavior, and you can see that it's a part of the frontal lobe. Then you have the fornix right here. The fornix is a white matter tract in your brain that plays a crucial role in memory and cognitive function. So this is the fornix. Then you have the thalamus. The thalamus is a big region in your brain right here that plays a role in emotion. It regulates fear, anxiety, behavior, memory, and all that is in this area called the thalamus. And then part of the thalamus is the hypothalamus. The hypothalamus is part of your endocrine system because it's going to send hormones through the infundibulum, which is a stalk here, to the pituitary gland. So the hypothalamus communicates with the pituitary gland, and the hypothalamus releases pretty much either releasing hormones or inhibiting hormones, which travels through the infundibulum into the pituitary gland and signal the pituitary gland to release further hormones downstream to regulate growth, development in the body. Then you have the mammillary body in this area. The mammillary body is involved in recalling memory. In the back, you can see right here, this is the pineal gland. The pineal gland is going to secrete melatonin whenever it is dark. So in the absence of light, melatonin is released by the pineal gland right here. And melatonin is a hormone that slows down your heart rate, slows down your body temperature. It pretty much relaxes you so that it can help you sleep. It doesn't cause you to go to sleep directly, but it changes the physiology of your body to aid you to go to sleep. So this is the pineal gland right here. And then in this portion, you can see two tiny bumps. This is the corpora quadrigemina portion. You have the superior colliculi, which is the top bump, and the inferior colliculi. The top bump is involved with visual reflexes, and the inferior colliculi is involved with auditory reflexes. They are both a part of the corpora quadrigemina structure of the brain. Okay, so now we're still looking at the brain in the sagittal view, but I want to go through all the ventricles in the brain. The ventricles in the brain are the structure that is carrying cerebral spinal fluid. So don't get weirded out by this picture. This is just a model of the ventricles in your brain, and it's sitting right here. So you have the right and left lateral ventricles. This is going to send cerebral spinal fluid through the third ventricle, so down this track, and then into the cerebral aqueduct. From there, it goes to the fourth ventricle. Now, in this diagram, the area is just showing you the general area where the ventricles would be. This is what it actually looks like. And if you're curious, the cerebral spinal fluid, they are produced by the epidermal cells in the choroid plexus right here. The epidermal cells are one of the supporting brain cells that you have, and they make cerebral spinal fluid in order to help cushion the brain, provides it with buoyancy, and facilitate waste removals in your brain. They do have a role in the blood-brain barrier as well. So cerebral spinal fluid is very important. It also travels through the central canal in the spinal cord as well. All right, so now we are looking at an inferior view of the brain, and this is a sheep brain. I like to go through the 12 cranial nerves that we have, and these nerves play a crucial role in sensory function, and it plays a role in controlling movements as well. The first cranial nerve that we see here is called the olfactory nerve, also known as cranial nerve 1. This is where this portion is responsible for smell, if you remember the olfactory tract here. This is cranial nerve 2, also known as optic nerve. This is responsible for vision. This is cranial nerve 3, also known as oculomotor nerve. This is involved in controlling eye movement, eyelid elevation, and pupil constriction right here, cranial nerve 3. This is cranial nerve 4, also known as the trochlear nerve. This is a motor nerve that controls the superior oblique muscle of the eye, and it's responsible for downward and inward eye movement. Then we have cranial nerve 5 here. So cranial nerve 5 is called the trigeminal nerve. It's a mixed nerve with sensory branches for the face. It's going to control forehead movement, jaw movement, and also chewing as well. This is cranial nerve 6, also known as the abducens nerve. This is a motor nerve that controls the lateral rectus muscle of your eye, and it's responsible for moving your eyes outwards. This right here, cranial nerve 7, this is the facial nerve. This is a mixed nerve that controls facial expression. It controls how you perceive taste as well, because it's going to your tongue, and it also controls your salivary gland. This is cranial nerve 8. This is also known as the vestibular cochlear nerve. It is a sensory nerve that is responsible for hearing and balance. And remember, I'm showing it to you on one side, but you also have it on the other side as well. And then we have cranial nerve 9. This is also known as the glossopharyngeal nerve. This is a mixed nerve that controls taste in the back of your tongue. It also helps with swallowing, and it influences your salivary glands as well. Then we have cranial nerve 10. This is the vagus nerve. It is a mixed nerve with wide range of function that goes all the way to your heart to control your heart rate. It controls digestion and sensation, movement, feeling in your throat and your larynx region. Your larynx is your voice box. And then we have cranial nerve 11 right here. This is the accessory nerve. It's a motor nerve, so it's going to send information outwards. It controls the sternocleidoid muscle that you have. It controls the trapezius muscles in your neck and shoulder as well. And then finally, we have cranial nerve 12. This is the hypoglossal nerve. This is a motor nerve that controls your tongue movement. So make sure you review these nerves and understand their function. I want to show you a dorsal view, so a bird's eye view of the sheep brain. Make sure you can identify all the structure listed here on the actual brain. Here is a ventral view, also known as an inferior view. Make sure you can identify all these structures. For the cranial nerves, you can only see 3 of them clearly, somewhat clearly in this view. And then finally, here's a sagittal view of the sheep brain. You should be able to find all of the structures here as well. All right, and that concludes the brain.